I hereby open this academic ceremony in which Benson Muthama will defend his academic thesis called Gender Empowerment for Men and Women's Participation in the Resolution of Land-Based Conflicts in Mount Elgon region, Kenya. Men's and women's participation in the resolution of land-based conflicts. Dear candidate, might I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis? The floor is yours.
Dear Prorator, dear members of the Defense Committee, dear family, friend, and colleagues on site and online, in the next 15 minutes, I will surely elaborate about my research. Thank you. I am presenting on a research entitled Gender Empowerment for Men's and Women's Participation in the Resolution of Land-Based Conflicts in Mount Elgon, Kenya. A subtitle of Men's and Women's Participation in Resolution of Land-Based Conflicts. I had supervisors led by Professor Anya Krumench, and I had also Professor Bon Habatas, Dr. Jen Alai, and Dr. Ingrid Westerdorp. In terms of the background of the study, Mount Elgon is, its target population is 32,300 in terms of the population. And in regards to the background of the study, the Elgon region has remained significantly affected by land disputes, and the region has fertile land for farming, hence contributing to these forms of disputes. And also, gender parity as women's participation in decision-making on land-based conflicts has remained low. And also globally, it's recognized that women bring perspectives, priorities, and strengths to conflict resolution and processes. The problem statement to the study, one of the area was the issue of disregard of women in the resolution of land-based conflicts. The underrepresentation of women, because then when it comes to resolution, it's clear for us to have men and women participating, and also the hindrances and obstacles in the resolution of land-based conflict, and that means the issue of inclusivity and participation. This then is effective participation of men and women is quite essential, and this provided the space for the study. The study had objectives, and the overall research question sought to assess gender empowerment for women and men participation in resolution of land-based conflicts in the region. And it had a number of research questions that were derived from the objective. And one of it was to explore obstacles to women's access to land and land governance. Secondly, impact of gender policies and laws on women's access to land and also land governance. The role of women in the resolution of land-based conflicts. The impact of formal justice and alternative dispute resolution mechanisms on women involvement. And finally, to determine gender-responsive strategies to foster gender equality. The significance of the study, one of the key areas was to understand that other studies had not explored participation. And by participation, I'm looking at the levels of participation, where you can be able to participate in decision-making tables, participating materially, or by representation. United Nations 2007 Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People advocates for equal participation of men and women, as well as also ascertaining the effective gender-responsive strategies that foster equality and inclusiveness. And therefore, the outcome of this study may be utilized to influence increased participation of women in land-based conflicts, and also provide an opportunity for policy, legal, and practice reforms, looking at the international frameworks that have been put into place, as well as the Constitution of Kenya that has given a leeway to the two-thirds gender principle. The study was guided by a theoretical framework and a research conceptual framework, And the theoretical framework looked at 3 theories. And the first theory was empowerment theory. And it looks at the agency, the voice, and the structure. By agency, we are looking at the self-esteem, the inner capabilities, as well as the components of making decision. The social exclusion theory looked at the inadequacy in terms of social participation because we have different levels of socialization. And finally, the participation theory, which puts factors that continue to compromise equal participation. The conceptual framework looked at gender policy, that is at the legislature to secure women access for land, and also legislation for better participation of women in decision making, meaning that if that is done, then there is women empowerment, and the women would also come into place of understanding the policies. In terms of also the issue of social exclusion, where we have gender inequalities in land access and governance, that then would help because once the women are empowered, they are able now to come into the social participation and well-being in terms of access to land and land governance for women. The research methodology looked at a mixed research approach where there was ethnographic in terms of going to the study region 6 months to study the way people live and their livelihoods, and also participatory action research approaches. The sampling looked at probability and non-probability sampling, and purposive sampling meant that I talked to adults living in the Mount Elgon region for more than 5 years, and also symbol random to eliminate bias. I interviewed a total of 379, that is 63% were women and 33% were men, and 4 did not specify. This data was triangulated by use of questionnaires, interviews that was in both qualitative and quantitative data were used. And for qualitative, I used focus group discussions, key informants to get sure that I get more information that would triangulate the quantitative data. Data was coded and analyzed through SPS version 21. And then in terms of ethical approvals, I sought this from Strathmore University and got a research permit from National Commission for Science, Technology, and Innovation. Study findings. The role of gender plays regarding use of land rights to properties, and it was clear from the research that long-standing patriarchal systems that relegate women to the bottom ranks of decision-making and property ownership that came out from the research, and therefore there are efforts to change the attitudes, perceptions, and behaviors of men towards ownership of properties and land by women. Secondly, in regards to national laws and policies on gender equality, there are substantial efforts that have been made by the Kenyan government, which has put in place gender equality laws and policies. However, women still face many serious challenges that hinder them from rising to leadership positions. Number 3, the role women play in resolution of land-based conflicts and access to land and property. The situation in Mount Elgon region is improving in the sense that people are beginning to acknowledge the role of both women and men in resolving land conflict. And women participation has also improved, with women taking positions of authority and getting involved in the management of Nyumba Kumi structures, which is a composition of 10 households. Number 4, the formal justice mechanism and alternative dispute resolution, and the process are widely and undeniable considered as a tool to boost the formal system in the country, and therefore Kenya makes use of both the formal and informal systems of resolving land-related disputes in the country. And finally, in regards to gender-responsive strategies that are put into place, there is the adoption of the 2/3 gender principle, which has been passed by the Parliament of Kenya. Education is also an agent or instrument for social change, which has been championed by a number of non-governmental institutions and the government itself. And it was clear that the theory of participation and empowerment becomes a reality in Mount Elgon, and there is also need to institutionalize ADR mechanisms, that is, alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. In conclusion to this study, success in adoption of policies and laws, the bigger challenge lies in successful implementation, which could be enabled through political goodwill. Equal participation in decision-making is an important condition for gender equality, and full participation is a means to end of social inclusion, meaning that women and men could be able to come in and participate in all levels, from the lower level to the high level of decision-making. There is need to fully involve women as well as men in resolution of land-based conflict for sustainable development. And finally, I need a holistic approach with combined strategies to ensure adoption and fully implementation to achieve equal participation. The study has a few recommendations. One, there is need for implementation of the ratified international and regional gender equality frameworks. Despite the increasing involvement of women in the resolution of land-based conflicts, levels of women's participation should be skewed to male advantage, should not be skewed to male advantage. There is need to adopt a holistic approach that would entail a combination of different strategies, and parties opting for alternative dispute resolution be accorded access to legal advice to prevent negative effects of power imbalance. And whether in Kenya or across the globe, both formal and informal education is critical to empower women so that they can take the center stage toward gender equality. Thank you for your attention. I now give back the word to the prorector.
Thank you very much for your very clear presentation. The opposition will now be opened by Professor Wesseling. She's a professor of cultural memory, gender and diversity of this university. The floor is yours.
Dear candidate, it is my honor and pleasure to be the first to congratulate you with the completion of your dissertation. It addresses an urgent societal challenge in Kenya with, I think, much wider societal resonances in different parts of the world. Your work is deeply and widely rooted in relevant publications on the topic. It has generated a substantial body of primary data, and it provides detailed and nuanced answers to the questions raised concerning gender equality in access to farmland in the Mount Elgon region. What I also really appreciate about your work is that you conclude every empirical chapter with translations of your research findings into policy proposals, into steps to be taken to work towards greater gender balance in the resolution of land-based conflicts. Well done. The question I would now like to pose is a very basic, fundamental one, and it bears on the key concept in your dissertation, I think, the concept of gender. So my first question is, could you kindly define gender? What is your understanding of gender?
Highly esteemed, thank you for the great question. Gender is the social cultural components that do affect men and women. And when it comes to the key in-depth definition of gender, I am looking at also sex that defines who a man is and who a woman is, and also the component of inclusion that also comes into play. So in summary, gender is in relation to the social cultural components that would help us and enhance in terms of achieving or not achieving to the required tenets in the land-based conflict.
Thank you. Your first word is social cultural, and I like that very much as a as I'm affiliated to the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. But if gender is a social cultural category in the first place, I would like to follow up with a question, what that would mean for implementation, for the application of your research findings to policy measures. Because if I study your recommendations, the accent falls on the introduction of laws, policies, and on mechanisms for enforcing those policies. But if gender is a social-cultural category, it also requires cultural change. And cultures cannot always be changed by laws and policies. Now, I think you realize that yourself, because one of your recommendations is to introduce a civic education program. That's an intriguing recommendation, but I do not know yet precisely what such a civic education program would look like. Can you tell us a bit more about what that would be in terms of a curriculum? What would be its contents? What would teachers teach in such a program?
Highly esteemed, thank you for the great questions. And I would start by pointing out that gender is not static, meaning that it changes over time. And when it comes to social cultural issues, it means that people living in societies would change depending on the levels of socialization, and also they will change in regards to the levels of education. And looking at the component of implementation, I would be able to say that social cultural components require models and approaches. And these models, one that I am going to deploy is the social analysis and action model. This is a customized model that looks at the beliefs and the social cultural issues where it is community-led. The communities themselves are able to sit down, identify the issues that are affecting them. And once they are able to do that, they will sit and prioritize the issues, whereby I'll make sure that I disaggregate. The women sit separately and men also sit separately so that they are able to be free and give out their voices. After this is done, then there is the next stage that would come in terms of bringing them together to just hear what the voices of women are and the voices of men are. Then moving from that point, it's development of an action plan, and this action plan is going to help to community-led, where they themselves can monitor on how the progress is. Yes, with the guidance of the local administration, as well as also guided by the documents and policies that have already been developed. On the civic education in regards to this program, looking at a curricula that is going to be translated in the local language, because one of the areas that women have been able to lag a little bit behind in the region, it's the levels of education. And a majority of the times, they are able to attend meetings, but they are not able to also get to understand the proceedings. So this curricula first would look at how I'll be able to think on a process that will move into translation. But the key point in regards to this curriculum would start by the basics, which are gender and sex, for them to understand the meaning of gender and the meaning of sex. Then the next items would look at also conflict and also the components of land, because it's a key issue, and also get to understand historically what has happened in the region, what this has led to the issues that are affecting them currently, and then from there, combining with the social analysis and action model, then they will be able now to start practicing amongst themselves and proceed to a level that they can monitor, which is a community-led practice that would lead to the transformation that would also link within the county level and also the national government.
Thank you very much. So it's a bottom-up approach that you advocate here, not a curriculum with fixed contents, but the issues are defined by the participants themselves.
Yes.
In their own language.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wesseling. We will now continue the opposition with Professor Townend. He's a professor of law, health and life sciences from the University of London City, St. George's, but also affiliated to Maastricht University. And now we hope that he will reconnect. We wait for a few seconds because he has kind of disappeared.
Hello, Pro-Rector.
Yeah, it works. Fantastic. The floor is yours.
You've seen me as well. Thank you very much, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, congratulations to you and to your supervisory team on your thesis. It's a very interesting work that highlights and seeks to understand important questions about equality in the heated area of property rights. I have first some questions about the theories that you use. Social exclusion theory, empowerment theory, participation theory. These are very interesting, and I wondered if you could explore for us now a little further why you chose those theories to underpin your thesis and how you feel that they helped to frame your inquiry.
Thank you, highly esteemed, in regards to, thank you so much, and I'm going to respond in regards to why I chose the theories. One of the reasons that led to me choosing these theories was the continuous issues and components of land-based conflicts that has affected the Mount Elgon region, a region that borders Kenya and Uganda. And that has led to many deaths that have left women as widows, and also women have been left with children. And what has happened previously is because of inheritance, the land goes to men who are relatives, and the women are left without land. So that is one of the reasons that led me to choose these theories in terms of the empowerment theory, the social exclusion, and participation theory. Secondly, I also realized through anecdotal evidence that this is a region that has faced imbalances when it comes to decision making and participation of women. In my thorough research, I would be able to see that women were being represented by their husbands or spouses, or they could also be participating materially, meaning that they will come with firewood, they will bring water, they will cook for the men, and they will not participate in the decision-making tables. And that led to exclusion in regards to the discussions. And so I wanted to ensure that within these theories, I'm able to factor in all these considerations so that there is more need for the participation and decision-making of men and women when it comes to the resolution of land-based conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very powerful justification. I almost hesitate now to ask my second question, which is I can see that the process of a fairer distribution of rights is of great importance. However, this is still very much within the paradigm of property as a human right to own private property. So I've got a couple of questions that come out of that, or a couple of framings of the question that come out of that. This is a very industrial revolution paradigm of individual ownership and exploitation of the land, that's in the face of the wicked problems faced by our communities. I'm thinking of things like environmental problems and the like. And that paradigm feels somewhat tired sitting in London or in Maastricht, let alone in the areas you studied. And I wondered if that sort of conceptualization of property resonates with the justice needs and traditions of the communities that you studied, and their common relationship with the land. So were there other theories that could have produced a perhaps more revolutionary, paradigm-shifting reimagining of the relationship that we have with land? Perhaps a milder version of that question is, was there an appetite amongst your research participants, especially the women, for more than gender equality and land ownership reforms?
Thank you for that great question. And I would start by saying that change is a process. And when it comes to social cultural components, where we are talking about the component of patriarchy, where the system has always been to the advantage of men, then I would be able to say that there is quite much of capacity building and strengthening that is required. And so in terms of responding to your question, where there is much with property as human rights to own property, but then there is also the component of the industrial revolution of individual ownership, I would be able to mention and start by saying that according to patriarchy and culture, women are not supposed to inherit land in the region of Mount Elgon. And also in terms of ownership, it is either where they are going to procure or buy that land. That is how they are able to possess that land. And looking at the revolution and the sensitization within our country, that is Kenya, there are efforts to ensure that women understand the need to own, as well as also men coming to realization of why inheritance is critical for women. But like I have mentioned, it is a process that is ongoing, and as time goes on, we are also realizing and seeing women putting their foot on the door to start also understanding these rights. And therefore, in terms of where justice is needed in regards and to the whole issue, I went further and looked at the formal systems and alternative dispute resolution. And I realized that within the formal systems, there is backlog and also delay, which fatigues most women due to the number of times that they have to go to the courts. Also the costs where they have to pay for transport and also other legal proceedings. And a majority of them get fatigued in the process. And so with the alternative dispute resolution, they are able now to get this within the local authority, which has been given a go-ahead by the Kenyan Constitution as a way of resolving conflicts. So the alternative dispute resolution has been spearheaded by the local administration, where we have the chief and the assistant chief. And if they are not able to resolve within this setting, then they are referred to the formal systems, because where they feel that justice has not been accorded. So there is a balance in terms of the formal and the non-formal, where the traditions are taken into place. But also, if the parties feel that they are not satisfied, there is also a leeway of the formal system. And finally, regarding the question on the theories that I have used and which other theory I would have also added, I would have put in the peace research theory, because apart from the empowerment and the different components, there is also need for people to also inherit, own, have the rights, but also live with harmony, which now would help them in terms of farming and getting sustainable mechanisms that would lead them to a way of living that would not take them back to where they were. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think you rightly say, this is already a paradigm shift. This is already a revolution. Thank you for your answer. I hand the floor back to the Pro-Rector.
Thank you very much, Professor Townend. Then the opposition will be followed by Dr. Moerland, who is working at the Department of Criminal Law and Criminology of this university, and he's also a secretary of this committee. The floor is yours.
Dear candidate, I want to congratulate you first with your manuscript that I've read with much pleasure. It was very well written, and I think the results are insightful, and in that sense I think it is a relevant and original contribution to the field of study. I'm, however, not only here to shower you with praise, I'm also here, it's my job as an opponent to ask, to critically reflect on your research, and because of that I want to present to you several questions that I would like to discuss further with you. My questions first relate to the conclusions of your work, and the other questions we go back to basically the start of your research, and it relates to the method that you followed. But let's start with the conclusions. Based on your insightful research, recommendations are included at the end of every substantive chapter, as also my colleague said. And also in the main conclusions, we find many recommendations. You also presented some of them today. The recommendations are geared towards solving the problems highlighted in the analysis, and there are many, including the recommendations to adopt certain gender equality laws, rules, and policies. However, as you also note in propositions 2 and 3 to the thesis, the adoption of such laws is not enough to solve the problems. More must be done, and according to you, this ideally requires a more holistic approach. You also refer to that in your introduction. The reality is, however, that resources and capacity are often limited, and I think the case that you studied is no exception in that regard. Capacity and resource limitations affect how many recommendations you can implement, and you therefore need to make strategic choices as to what recommendations are most important. What would you focus on first? What is foundational to solve the problems? What can come later? And what can even be left aside? To put it differently, and here comes my first question, may I ask you to reflect on whether there is a hierarchy in the recommendations, and if so, what would this mean for the order of implementation, especially if capacity is limited and you need to make strategic choices about what to implement and what not.
Esteemed, thank you for the questions regarding to the conclusions being at the end of every chapter and having the main conclusion. In regards to resources and capacities being limited and also affecting some of these recommendations, I would be able to mention that, like I mentioned as a process, there are the low-hanging fruits that I have to start with, because I can't start climbing the tree from the top. It has to start from the bottom. And looking at this, there will be need to conduct agenda analysis. And agenda analysis gives the needs and the priorities that helps in terms of identifying these low-hanging fruits. Agenda analysis looks at the opportunities also within this community. And after being able to do this, then there is need to develop an action plan. And the action plan now gives the different activities, the indicators for measuring, as well as also how to evaluate the same. And so looking at the conclusion in the different components, I would be able to say that I'll use a multi-pronged approach, because if I would like to influence at the bottom, it is also very critical to influence in the top level, because the policies are also made at the high level, but then at the lower level, they are also having their ways and systems of living. So it would be, yes, a multi-pronged approach where there is advocacy at the national level, the members of parliament to get to understand why they need to emphasize more on the cascading of the laws to the local communities. And then on the lower level, there is also advocacy that would help them to, the people on the ground to understand that we need to get to know our rights. We also need to know what needs to happen if a husband dies, or what needs to happen when I am getting property together with my husband or my spouse. Then that would help in terms of connecting between the two. So on prioritization, I would be able to say that on the conclusions, I would start with conclusion number 4, where there will be need for the women to understand why they need to be involved. Because one of the gaps that I saw during the research was a majority of them didn't see the need to also attend the meetings or the discussions. So it would be a low-hanging fruit for me to start on the women getting to understand why they need to be involved in this process. This would lead now to the participation, which means that I'll start the process of ending social exclusion. And that is number 3. That would help in terms of ensuring there is equal participation in decision making when the women and men are included, which would be an important condition for gender equality. That is conclusion number 2 that would follow. And then I would go then now to number 5 to start now using the holistic approaches, which would bring the combination of what I mentioned, like the social analysis and action model. I'll also use the community scorecard, which also brings in the communities for them to score the progress and where the underpinnings are. And then finally, in terms of looking at the success in adoption of the policies and laws, then at that point, I will be able now to evaluate and see whether the policies, because if you look at my theory, my conceptual framework, there is a lot on the bottom in regards to the policies. That would help me in terms of looking and checking whether bottom up or up down, that the political goodwill has been cascaded. In regards to the recommendations in terms of prioritization, I would be able to ensure that because the alternative dispute resolution is a low-hanging fruit, and it has been given by the Constitution for the local people to get utilized on it. That would be the lowest level in terms of sensitizing them, getting to understand how this helps them, and also give the options of if you are not satisfied, there are also the legal channels that you could also use, and that would help in terms of interconnecting with the other recommendations as I roll out the process.
Thank you. I think it's a very elaborate and also a good answer. So it's not bottom up or top down, but you need to pinch at both levels.
Yes.
My second question, and I will keep it very briefly. We go back to the beginning of your research, and you focus on different methodologies, also participatory action research. Your research revolves around gender dynamics and inequality, and in this study you focus on this participatory action approach, in which you relied heavily on interviews and focus groups. And this raises the question for me whether similar gender issues could have arisen in the context of the interviews and the focus groups that were conducted. So may I ask you, briefly, to reflect on how, for instance, aspects of gender, power and conflict affected or might have affected interviews and their outcomes, and what did you do to prevent or address such dynamics? Thank you.
Esteemed, thank you for that question in terms of gender power balances and how they might have affected. And I would start by mentioning that during the study, when it came to data collection, and because of the issues that are already within the place where men still feel that they are domineering when it comes to land-based issues, there was tension in between when I started the discussions. And how I managed to ease this tension was to do an ethnographic approach, where I went to the region for 6 months before the data collection, for me to start learning and getting to know how the people are living and how the behaviors are. Before the 6 months, I previously had a program that I spearheaded in the region for 3 years that had given me a contextual view and the components on the cultural issues within the area. So within the start, I started by going through the cadres that are given by the government, and I reported to the county government, and I explained that I would like to carry out this research, and they gave me an approval. The second stage was now for me to move and go and meet the sub-county officials, the peace committees, for me to get also to understand how they have been working in the region. And I was introduced by the local administration on the ground. And when I was having discussions with men and women, it was quite at ease because I had to separate the groups. The focus group discussions, I had to separate women only, men only, but also to get a view of a mixed approach, I also had a focus group that had men and women combined. That is now the focus group discussion that brought the issues of power, because a majority of women were not vocal compared to when I could interview them separately. And for me to handle this, I was able to encourage the women to continue participating and also to share their views. And by the end of the discussion, I had captured views from both men and women in that interview. In regards also to other issues in terms of power, I would also like to mention at that point, the local administration also, a majority of them were men, and a few, I only had one woman who was a chief, and she came out also to communicate to the women on the ground that she has risen to the ranks because she had to go against some odds, which are the cultural issues. And most women felt that this is a role model who has achieved, and for us also we can come in and contribute into the research. And those two methodologies helped me in terms of addressing the issue, the power issues and the imbalances when I was collecting this data.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Moerland. We now continue with Dr. Bukuluki. He works at the Department of Social Work and Social Administration at Maastricht University, Kampala, Uganda. Welcome to this session, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to the candidate, Benson. I do congratulate you, and being a neighbor, I have a lot of interest in the issues you are investigating, because they not only apply to Kenya, but also to Uganda. So I just want to congratulate you for starters, but also to ask a few questions for clarity. I see, in my opinion, the work you are doing rests a lot on social and gender norms. So I'm wondering the extent to which you have read literature on social and gender norms to help you position your work within that literature, because the way studies now on gender and power conceptualized come from this perspective of social and gender norms. I don't seem to hear a lot about that. Could you explain if you refer to one of the key authors that speak about social and gender norms, particularly applying the social norms diagnostic framework, but also thinking about the social norm and gender norm change frameworks that are being applied to shift social norms that underlie patriarchy, and how those influence on access to and control of resources, including issues of power. So that is one. Two, because they are related, I would like you to reflect on, to help me understand, if at all, the extent to which you applied the intersectionality lens, which suggests that actually, people hold different positionalities in society based on either on their race, ethnicity, class, age, or education, which intersects reinforce inequalities and may afford an individual relative privilege at any given time. And of course, power, which you make reference to a lot, is central to intersectionality. In any given context, one's identity will afford them more or less power in position to another. So I would like to understand, because from what I understand, as even you explaining the focus group discussions, men and women are not homogeneous categories. Within the class of men, there are power hierarchies, they are different positionalities and social identities. Also within women, they are not a homogeneous category. You might find that they differ by age, socioeconomic status, by by education, by even residence, whether they're in a rural or urban area. So there could be different women from the positionalities they hold could hold different power even within them, like men too. So to what extent do you apply the intersectionality lens to reflect on these different social identities that cross gender with ethnicity, age, class, religion, disability, to be able to understand the impact of these or the impact of these positionalities on access and use of land, as you state. And related to that also, if you could reflect on how you applied the concept of agency in helping you to see if, like, you did give us an example of this woman who was a chief, like that is positive deviance. So did the agency play at all any role in the way people navigated the structural barriers embedded in culture, embedded in patriarchy, to be able to achieve their goals in respect to access and use of land? Thank you very much.
Thank you, esteemed, and thank you so much for that question. In regards to the social and gender norms regarding to literature review, I would start by mentioning that I did rigorous research in regards to literature review, looking on issues pertaining gender norms. And I looked at the work that has been done by Pretty 1995, and Pretty has defined the levels of participation. And within these levels of participation, Pretty has looked at where women would participate materially, they would participate via representation, or they would participate during the decision-making tables. So according to this research, I was able to see the gaps regarding participation because other authors had also quoted Pretty in regards to how this was an area that was a stumbling block for the participation of women. I also looked at work for Caroline Moser, and Caroline Moser looks at the triple roles, that is reproduction, production, and community roles. And this helped me in terms of looking at the roles that men and women do play within the communities. I also looked at the Harvard framework, which looks at the time and activity profile, because in most of this context, and especially Mount Elgon region, women would wake up early and sleep late, meaning that they would do most of the roles, whereas the men would wait until the productive component comes, and that is once it's harvested, then they are able to receive the proceeds from the harvest. The final area in regards to where I looked at on literature was on Sarah Longwe, and she looks at the 5 levels, which is control, access, participation, warfare, and conscientization. And these components help in terms of understanding who has access to what, who has control over what, and who participates most when it comes to the matters that are pertaining resources. And those are part of the gender frameworks that I also looked at when I was conducting this research. The second question is about application of intersectionality lens. And I would start by mentioning that I made sure that there was no discrimination when it came to the selection of the participants. And as I had mentioned, I made sure that there was disaggregation of men, women during the carrying out of the interviews. And I also ensured that there were safe spaces where during the interview process, women were able to sit in a place where they would be able to give their views. Now, coming to the deeper component in regards to the age, ethnicity, age, and religion, I would really say that due to the issue of homogeneity, I designed my questionnaire to capture the components of disaggregation, where I had categorized the different components. For instance, age. I had categories of age that has been approved by the National Demographic Department, which now helped me in terms of understanding the issues regarding the different segments of age, because women between the age of 18 and 24 may not have the same needs like women who are the age of 40 years. And this came actually in one of the surveys where the issue of power, women who have reached the age of 50 plus were able to contribute more. They had more space in these discussions, and they were able also to influence. So this helped me in terms of disaggregating and getting the views from the different components. Then finally, looking at the concept of agency, I would be able to say that, like I have mentioned, the component of the frameworks that I used for Sarah Longwe, there is a component of looking at agency, which agency looks at the confidence, the self-esteem, and how you are able to represent yourself when it comes to matters of ownership and issues of land-based conflict. And the design of my questionnaire captured questions that were perceptional, that were looking on how they would be able to disagree or agree on a particular component. And that helped me in terms of measuring the agency and getting the results of understanding that a majority of women were able to participate at materially, where they would provide firewood, they would bring water, and cook for the men when they are having the discussions. I would also see that the only few women who are able to sit at that level were women who had that agency built, the confidence strengthened, because they have some responsibility and power within the society to sit in such kind of a setup. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bukuluki, for the opposition. We will now continue with the next opponent, Professor De Wit. He has a chair in interdisciplinary social science from the Department of Public Health, Utrecht University. And we see now quite a number of interesting movements on the screen. So we will wait until Professor De Wit can hear us. Yes, it works. 1 second, because we see all kinds of options on the screen that we could click on but should not do. Yes. Do you have a sound for us, Professor De Wit?
I think I do.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pro-Rector, and apologies for any technical issues. At my side, it seems to be fine. Dear candidate, I would also like to start by, first of all, commending you with your dedication to social development and gender equality, gender equity, perhaps even. Very important, and also to congratulate you and your supervisors on the important work that you've been doing and reporting in your thesis. Gender empowerment is truly a critical issue, and your focus on women and men's participation in relation to land use, ownership, and involvement in conflict resolution is interesting and important, and your studies are truly insightful. Well, it is also my major role to ask you some hopefully challenging questions. And I would like to continue a bit of the focus on the role of traditional and cultural attitudes and practices. Some previous opponents have touched on those issues as well in conversation with you. In Proposition 4, you summarize that long-standing tradition and culture among the community in the region that has been accumulated over the years contributes to gender perceptions regarding the roles that men and women play in the resolution of land conflicts. And then in Proposition 5, you continue more or less on that, and then you note that the clan system remains strongly reluctant to the notion of land title deeds bearing women's names, because that's a sign of ownership, and that women themselves do not oppose their partners holding ownership on their behalf. The first question I would like to ask you is this question on cultural and traditional beliefs and practices comes back in, I think, nearly every chapter in your dissertation. I was wondering, and it comes bottom up from the research that you did, but I was also wondering whether it came as a surprise to you, whether it was a novel insight for you.
Highly esteemed, thank you for the question. And regards to cultural traditions and beliefs, this did not come fully to a surprise to me, because I had worked in the region for 3 years, and I had also developed interest in terms of understanding why, which led me to conducting of the research to get to understand why the cultural traditions are quite in-depthly inbuilt within this society.
Okay. Thank you very much. I was hoping that you would say that, because also given the central role in your research as a finding, and your sensitivity and knowledge around cultural traditions, I was wondering how you would, if you were to sort of redesign your conceptual framework, for instance, as you show it on page 25, how you could adapt that to include this notion of cultural and traditional beliefs and practices. How do you see it sit in that framework? Or perhaps another way of saying it, your conceptual framework is strongly linked to, let's say, processes of concepts related to policy and law. And how would a social science perspective feature in that, given that the social aspects feature so importantly?
Thank you for that question. And looking at the conceptual framework, this is a component that I was able to pick it at the lower cadre, where it comes to the gender policies, legislation of better participation of women in decision making, because looking at the levels of decision making, that is where we do have the cultural norms and the cultural issues, and also when it comes to participation. This is how they have been brought up as women. This is how they have been brought up as men. And it is a system that is within them that I don't have to sit where men are making decisions. So if then at the gender policy level, there is a component of ensuring that as they sit, they have the agency, they get the component of having the self-esteem that would boost them to understand even at that lower level, we have powers, we are the powerhouse to make decisions and participate. Then that the conceptual framework then helped me in terms of gauging on the same. Again, on the women's empowerment looks at two components. It looks at women's economic empowerment and male engagement. So the women economic empowerment component, it's the one that gives us the agency, the voice, and the structure. And then on the other side, it's how now men can come in to understand that when it comes to ownership of land or the rights that have been ascribed by the Constitution, it is for the benefit of all of us being able to enjoy and enjoy without any inhibiting factors. So then that has also captured the same in regards to the social cultural components, and also finally under the social exclusion.
That is perfect timing. You finished your answer and they all came in. Dear candidate, dear Benson, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee here will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations here in this room and our return. I adjourn this session.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Southside, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Your mind, years can't fly by now. Don't waste all your time, 'cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part, cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. Southside, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
pictures. Dear Benson Muthama, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Krummeij is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times?
Yes.
To be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Benson Mutuku Muthama, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary and the other members of the committee and affixed with the official seal of the university. The laudatio will be...
Geef jij de microfoon even aan?
Hier,
Ja, dat is makkelijker. Ja.
Oh, this one. Okay. Is it on?
Dear Benson, now Dr. Muthama, an accomplishment results from hard work, strong dedication, and courage. It is a great honor and pleasure for me to congratulate you on your newly attained academic degree. I speak also on behalf of your first and second promoters, Professors Anja Krummeij and Bart van der Bonne, and also your co-promoter, Dr. Ingrid Westendorp, all of Maastricht University, to say, if I may use one of the professor's words, that we are indeed very pleased and rewarded by a successful defense of your doctorate thesis today. The subject of your thesis is not entirely new, as issues of gender power imbalance and its threat to sustainable livelihoods is a recurring problem. Efforts toward resolution remain elusive due to a mix of patriarchy and constantly vested socio-political interests impacting on the successful implementation of gender policies, especially those regarding land ownership by women and girls. Your thesis is well poised to support the 2030 Global Strategy for Sustainable Development, particularly as pertains to the overarching strategy of transformed societies and/or social institutions. At the heart of this are development goals to eradicate poverty in all forms and to seek to realize the human rights of all and achieve gender equality. Your work is undertaken and interpreted in an action research context with recommendations couched in a ready format for learning and adaptation, taking cognizance of critical recommendations and nuances for effective programming in gender empowerment and the drive to equitable societies. In this regard, and I'm not asking any questions to you, but questions that stand out for practitioners, Firstly, what is needed to overcome women's internal fears about losing belongingness and getting over cultural encumbrances that deem it a taboo for a girl or a woman to demand rights to land and ownership. Secondly, what is needed to secure a gender equitable balance for the professional who, being part and parcel of the given sociopolitical context and or social institutions, is also charged with formulating and implementing policies on matters that appear to go against what they have known all their life. Last but not least, by what lens is success being measured, and how well does this fit with the global agenda to fit solutions and their monitoring to the local and country contexts, thereby answering the counter question of whether we are doing the right things in the right way. Your analysis was well focused to pick these critical recurring challenges within the relevant shifting sociopolitical interests and why the three must be addressed in tandem. I must also warmly recognize the team at Maastricht University for settling journal publication fees of the articles in this thesis, and also via the Dovikenslag HL Foundation supporting your data collection. We thank Maastricht for this support. In closing, I want to recognize you as a person, Benson. You have risen against all odds. You joined my work team some few years back as a young man without any university degree. Yet among 36 research assistants I was working with back then, you showed a lot of potential. It was my first time meeting you, but you stood out in a way that I could not ignore. And I managed to convince my boss to allow me to take you on as a personal assistant on my projects. Benson, being the go-getter you are, you were shuttling between field assignments in remote districts and returning to the capital city by night bus every weekend to attend your undergraduate classes. Your sheer hard work and paying due diligence to detail and processes is one of the reasons we are celebrating your attainment of this doctorate. Your successful publication of all the research papers contained in this thesis earned you an advanced acceptance into a postdoc fellowship at the prestigious Strathmore University, a renowned global institution based in Kenya. In Kenya Speak, as I close, your trajectory is summarized in the saying, it is God only. In Swahili, we say, ni Mungu tu. And this is the equivalent of saying in a language that most people understand, dreams are valid. May you continue to soar high, Benson. And once more, congratulations, Dr. Muthama.
Thank you.
Dear Dr. Muthama, congratulations on behalf of this university. We are very proud of you, and we also feel honored that you chose this university to do your doctorate here. I also want to congratulate your team who helped you, and from the boardroom I can say that everyone was impressed with your thesis, the truly multidisciplinary work, but also the very balanced and thoughtful answers you gave during the defense. A job well done, so you can take that with you. And I wish you a bright future, because you're hinting on a very important topic, which still needs a lot of work. You actually want to change the culture, which is not an easy thing to do. So we're now first going to change the culture here, because we now go for the drinks and the reception and the congratulations. So thank you very much. I now conclude this session, and we'll do then a number of household messages. Okay. We will first join here for a session with a photo with the opponents on the background who are online. See, they're already behind you. They really support you now. We do that first, and then we go to the big hall and have a session on the stairs in which you take a photo, and in between we will have a small congratulation round with the people who are online. So first a picture here. zou het niet geheim houden.